Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to see you all today. Welcome to the Star King Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. My name is Jess Dutal, and it is my pleasure to be with you here this morning. Our summer services theme is Cultivating Love. And all the lay people lead these services. It's a pleasure to see you all. Our minister, the Reverend Linda Barnes, will be back in the pulpit on September 14th. And today,
it's going to be the 7th.
It's going to be the 7th. Thank you, Sue Ellen. Our Reverend Linda will be back on September 7th, so we're looking forward to that. And today we are so pleased to be joined by Lee Webster. Lee is an internationally recognized educator and public speaker on funeral reform and has served in major leadership positions of the Green Burial Council, Conservation Burial Alliance, National Home Funeral Alliance, the National End of Life Doula Alliance, the New Hampshire Funeral Resources and Education, and Natural Burial New Hampshire. She is the author of several home funeral and green burial books and an instructor of online courses through Redesigning the End, Dartmouth, Osher, UNH-OLLI, and other higher education venues. It is our customary tradition for us as a fellowship to begin our service lighting our chalice. Today's chalice lighting reading is by David Brennan. We light this chalice remembering and honoring our own tradition and celebrating the rich diversity of traditions among us as we search for justice, meaning, and purpose. May we remember that justice, meaning, and purpose live first in deeply listening to one another. Please join me in welcoming Lee.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much. I forgot to lay out materials for you, but I have plenty. Come on up when we're all done. It's really nice to be back and see a lot of familiar faces. Can you hear me?
No.
This?
You need to like lick the thing.
All right, I'm gonna have to do this then. And let me try to not be quite so short.
I think you can push that thing down.
I have pushed it,
Oh.
I think, as far as it'll go.
No, I mean, you can push the speaker down.
All right. So, this is one of my favorite topics, obviously. I've been doing this for about 18 years now. And I know that it's one of your favorite topics too, even though you might not think so. The reason is that, like, I read books and I watch movies and I watch TV, especially those British mysteries, those murder mysteries. And probably you do too, because everywhere we go, there's a little bit of something everywhere. Oh, good. Something for short people. Thank you. Even better. Marvelous. Yes! I need one of these everywhere I go. So, chances are that we have something else in common, though. When faced with the question of what to do with our mortal remains, more people are hoping to exit the planet in a more environmentally friendly way, an environmental stewardship way, and doing things that protect the land and the communities, the human communities, wildlife, plant communities that sustain us. We're all trying to do this while we're still honoring the needs of families in our communities. So I do want to let you know that I overload slides on purpose. Everybody has a different learning style. Some people want to just eat it all up. For those of you who don't want to read a bunch of stuff on a screen, we have lovely pictures for you. And all you have to do is step back and relax and just listen. There's no test at the end. But I like to start with how we got here to begin with. There are two disruptive innovations in American funeral history that made American death practices what they are today. And the first was embalming. Everybody's surprised. But without Abraham Lincoln, there would have been no regulation on field surgeons. Surgeons went out and made a bundle because they could make more money embalming than healing the dead on the battlefield. But they spent a lot of money experimenting with the Civil War dead, particularly the ones that were going on the now northbound rails to get back home to their families. The craze for public viewing was, that wouldn't have become a compulsion if his body hadn't been witnessed by millions of people along those railroads and in major cities. He was embalmed at least 5 times during a 2-week trip on the Lincoln Express, or the Lincoln Special, I guess they called it at the time. This was a train that took him back to Springfield following the route he'd taken to get to Washington. And he had on the train with him his son Willie, who had died at the age of 12, 3 years earlier. Lincoln had had him embalmed and had him, not buried, actually went and visited him periodically and had him take the top off the casket so that he could view him. Took him back to Springfield as well. The funeral industry that Lincoln had helped to create by ordering War Order number 39, which said that embalmers had to be licensed. That's how we got the funeral industry. Wasn't there before. And they all clued in a little bit later as they started to form. They clued into what was called the first germ panic. That went from 1910 to 1940, and it convinced people that dead bodies were dangerous for the first time. People didn't really, unless there was a cholera outbreak or something like that, the plague, bodies weren't dangerous, no one considered them dangerous, but now people were convinced that only funeral directors could handle being in close proximity. So that changed not just the industry piece, but also the way that Americans started to look at being around the dead. So this other fellow, who's not from Raiders of the Lost Ark, although there are some similarities, I think you'll see, his name was Wilbur Haas, and he was the nephew of a German immigrant concrete magnate who took a trip to Egypt in 1930 to visit King Tut's tomb. By the way, that's right in the middle of that germ problem, right? And he had a light bulb moment standing there. When he returned to the States, he built the first concrete vault to go around a casket. He lined it with asphalt, and the patent explains that he did this to guarantee protection from, wait for it, this is good, zombies and ghouls. It was a big zombie movie craze that started in the late 20s. And by that point, everybody was believing in all of it, and they wanted to be protected from it. So 2 things to know. Embalming has no public health or safety benefit, and the preservation period is just enough to get through a public viewing at the funeral establishment. There's really no reason for it other than that. Vaults are primarily used now to keep the lawn flat for mowing. That's all they're good for. Although, maybe it's still those zombies, I don't know. Maybe it's been really effective. I haven't seen any walking around Riverside, so we'll see. Ghouls, by the way, that's another word for grave robbing. And by the time Haas had come up with this great idea, that had been dealt with. We didn't have grave robbing, hadn't had it for decades. But people were still afraid of all of these things. So both of these disruptive innovations really served the purpose in their moment. But they also set a precedent for other funeral, what I call sales opportunities, by what I call entrepreneurs. You'll see what I mean in a minute. A lot of these are questionable. Today we call it outright greenwashing. And in recent years, you may have heard of one or more of these items that are up here. I'm going to go through them really quickly. On the top left, we've got burial pods. These are made of biodegradable plastic. They look like eggs, but and they look like they're made for full humans, but they're not. They're made for cremation, cremated remains. The next one is the mushroom soup. Lots of people get really excited about this. It's a soup that's infused with spores. Unfortunately, it doesn't do anything. The last field study that was attempted was abandoned halfway through because there's nothing happening in this zoo whatsoever. The idea was to do something that nature does automatically and naturally underground. So sorry, Luke Perry, you may have heard he was buried in one of these suits for a great deal of money. The bottom coffin, this is absolutely fully biodegradable. Everything about it is wonderful, except that it was made in Indonesia, shipped all the way here. Big carbon footprint to get it here. And we're not guaranteed that these weren't made by tiny hands. So we're concerned about child and forced labor in some of these products. The final image is a memorial forest, and you may have heard about these. They get a lot of press as well. The idea is that a family has the opportunity to fork over about anywhere around $20,000 a pop to spread cremated remains around a tree. And people are buying it. It's phenomenal to me. There are no guarantees. This property could be resold at any time. It's not a cemetery. Doesn't have to be a cemetery when you have cremated remains. And they pretend to have a land trust, but it's not SPNF, believe me. It's just something on paper. So these are just a few of the examples that it's easy to get excited by and get caught up in, but you get the gist. You got to watch out for product marketing these days. All right, so there are a few specific areas of reform that are underway, and particularly being addressed in the natural burial field. So I want to mention these really quickly. As we move through the logic of natural burial, you want to try and keep some of these areas in mind. I think it helps understand it better. The first is to know about funeral poverty, which may not be a phrase that we all have in our current vocabulary, but it's impacting thousands of people in America every year. And it's growing. It's all about the lack of access and the financial imbalances that are inherent in the current funeral system. We buy into it willingly. We automatically think when someone's died, we have to make the call. Well, in 2023, the US Federal Reserve reported that 63% of Americans can't afford a $400 unplanned expense. That's $400. Unfortunately, we have 10 states that legally compel, which again is a nice word for force, families to hire a professional to handle funerals that cost between $8,000 and $18,000 base, regardless of their ability to pay. Unfortunately, New Hampshire's not one of them. We can do everything we need to by ourselves, or with funeral directors. We call that blended funeral, and that's fine too. Most people opt into the system, so that's fine, but what we're finding is that they're taking out mortgages and loans and depleting their savings in order to pay for services because they think they have to do it a certain way. A recent study confirmed an earlier one that I had done, and people with the highest median income and education levels spend the least amount on funerals, and the opposite is true too. Those who have the lowest income, the lowest education levels, spend the most on funerals. So we need to find a way to shift that. Ensuring access to education about funeral laws and about all these practices and what we have to do, what we don't have to do. All of these things that we need to know to conduct end-of-life rituals for loved ones. All that's key to making informed decisions, regardless of income, regardless of religious preference even. Environmental justice, that's the right to ethical, balanced, and responsible uses of land. This is central to fair access. So it's a top priority for natural burial ground projects. And so is minimizing environmental impact. And this is mostly what I'll be talking about today. Conventional lawn burials require concrete vaults to go around those caskets for those nice flat lawns. They're going to be around those containers that are made of metals, steel from Canada and China, hardwood from South American rainforests. All of this becomes part of the permanent installation of cemeteries, creating what's called cemetery plume, what I call underground warehouses for the dead. And add to that the carbon footprint of growing and harvesting, transporting, manufacturing, storing all of this stuff, plus things like embalming fluids, herbicides, pesticides, petroleum byproducts. You can see that we do have a pretty serious problem. And what's the climate change connection? We're going to be talking about climate resiliency. It's all about carbon emissions. It all comes down to what's greener than something else, all right? It's all about comparing these different methods. Vaults that are made from concrete emit about 1,800 pounds of carbon per unit during manufacture. Flame cremation emits about 250 to 535 pounds per person. And alkaline hydrolysis is about 150 pounds. Human composting, and we're going to talk about these different processes a little bit more in detail. But what you need to know about this is that the methods vary, the processing of what are called the bulking agents, those vary too. So we don't have an estimate on what it's going to be, but you'll be able to make some pretty good educated guesses. The only disposition method that actually sequesters carbon and nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus is natural burial. So here's a quick snapshot of New Hampshire statistics that takes the actual pounds of carbon emissions in 2022. That's the latest we have the data on. All of this due to cremation. This translates into base figures of what could have been carbon sequestration if everyone had been buried naturally. So instead of emitting 14 million pounds, we could have sequestered more than 172,000. So imagine what that looks like year after year after year. So quickly we're going to go through these 3 cremation processes, and it may surprise you that they are, but each one of them removes the soft tissue and goes to bone. So the logic of some people in choosing flame cremation varies. Everybody's got a different idea for why they're choosing it. Some think it's less expensive than burial, but I know of green burial cemeteries here in New Hampshire that charge $15 a plot. So that shoots that reason. Some find it convenient, less complicated, and I can't argue with that. But many of us are looking for more connection and not less when a loved one dies. And some are thinking that they're saving land. Though all they're doing is skirting the issue, only actually buying and stewarding land really saves land, basic conservation premise. More people think it's environmentally sound, so that's where we're going to go now. Flame cremation consumes large quantities of fossil fuel, emits mercury, other heavy metals into the atmosphere, and all that comes down into our waterways. This study in Minnesota years ago estimated 14% of the mercury in our waterways was attributable to cremation. So that's pretty significant. All of this, it amounts to a lot of greenhouse gases too. And this results in a byproduct that has to be disposed of. It's 8 to 10 pounds of crushed bone, and that's comprised of calcium phosphate and sodium. And all of that, especially with all of that phosphorus, makes this up to 2,000 times too alkaline, too sweet for plant growth. So, burying it or spreading it around in your garden is going to deter root growth and plant growth. You don't want to put it under grandma's rose bush. So don't encourage that. Nutrients previously available are going to be destroyed. They're incinerated. They're unavailable. That's all there is to that. Spreading it on fragile alpine or other surfaces like this, because these gentlemen are, in enough quantity can cause phosphorus runoff that can create algae bloom. And that's what kills plants and marine life. We've seen this with fertilization from farms that go into waterways. And buried in quantity, this can endanger soil microbial communities too, and girdle and kill trees. So, on the plus side of flame cremation, it doesn't cost $20,000 to spread this anywhere you want to, as long as you have landowner permission. It's completely free. You can put it anywhere you want legally. So alkaline hydrolysis is another process. You can see it has all these other names. You're going to hear all these names everywhere. This has been used for a couple of decades, mostly by to manage medical waste in facilities. The Mayo Clinic is one that has used this for a long time. And it's just becoming applied to humans, full humans, rather than just animals or this medical waste. It takes forced heated water infused with potassium hydroxide. That's lye. And what that does is dissolve that soft tissue, and then we have more bone because we haven't burned it all up. We do have lower carbon emissions than, as I said, greener than flame cremation. But it also adds not just 10 to 15 pounds of material, it's also going to add about 300 gallons of the effluent that has to go somewhere. And the EPA, USDA, anybody who manages this kind of stuff, they've not come up with a plan. So it's going into our wastewater treatment plants, which is perfectly safe, by the way, but it is taxpayer, money that pays for those. By the way, New Hampshire made this legal in 2013 and then made it illegal in 2014. Forward thinking, backward walking. Last one is, and again, this is a cremation process because it just takes care of the soft tissue and the bones are left. This has been getting a lot of treatment in the press. They keep calling it green burial, and as you're going to see, it's not green and it's not burial. But it is something else. It's a third process. Human composting it happens in facilities that ship in these natural materials. They come from around the country. Most of them are, things like wood chips and straw. So those have to be, you have to make them and bring them in. The facility you're looking at right now is in Washington, Seattle, Washington. So this is a multi-million-dollar facility in an urban sort of industrial park. They have a beautiful presentation here. This is where the ceremony occurs. And it looks as though everybody's going into a beehive, but I'll show you in just a sec what happens after that. The alfalfa is the green in the compost mix. Most of the alfalfa in this country is manufactured in the Four Corners region in the West, in the Colorado River Basin. And about 86% of the water that comes out of the Colorado River Basin is for livestock, growing cattle and so on. And about 32% of that is for alfalfa itself. So significant water resource use. And then getting from the Four Corners to Seattle is a whole other story. So we look at that. Once everybody's in place, and this is, by the way, this is with the back of the house. These are the lockers where everything actually happens. These are humidity controlled, temperature controlled, all of that. After a month or so, it's down to bone, and the bones are removed, pulverized, just like they are with other cremation processes, and then returned to the material. After that, it sits for a little bit longer, and then it goes here. They truck it out of the city about an hour out to a place called Bell's Mountain, and they spread it on the top of the ground. Pretty much it. You can use it in your garden. It's perfectly safe. There's nothing wrong with this material. It's just wood chips that haven't fully decomposed yet. So if they call it soil, it's not soil. It's actually wood chips. And then here's the thing to know. The multi-million-dollar affair is happening in the city. Those of us in rural areas are looking at plywood cradles, we call these, with hand cranks. So, which one do you think New Hampshire's going to end up with? They work just fine, too. They do the job. One more thing to think about, and you've been noticing I have the costs here as well, but I like to make the correlation between time and money, because as you can see, the price goes up as the process takes longer. A typical flame cremation takes about 2 to 3 hours. Alkaline hydrolysis 12, and then we're up to about 2 months for human composting. The thing to know is that when New York City, when we were going through COVID together in New York City, we were seeing all of those trucks loads with people waiting to be cremated. Out of the 5 boroughs, there are 4 cremation retorts. One of them was out of commission during most of COVID, so there were only 3. you heard about that, but what you didn't hear about was how many of those people were driven an hour out of town to natural burial cemeteries and managed that way. So that was happening, we just didn't hear about it. A much more sustainable way of managing things. So all of that is to just set the table for you. I know it's a lot to take in and it's a lot to know, but without understanding that, so that you can compare it to the process of natural burial, it's really hard to understand, right? All those other things get a lot of attention. I always tell people, you know, natural burial just isn't sexy enough. All those things sound so cool and interesting. Natural burial is just simple. It's just basic. We can reduce our carbon footprint significantly and employ these tactics to strengthen climate resiliency by simply burying the body, full body earth burial, no impediments to natural decomposition. We just want to bury at about 3.5 to 4 feet, and it might surprise you to know that that is the legal depth of burial in all but 2 states. And 2 states, which is New Jersey, Arizona, go to 5 feet. 6 feet is sort of a John Wayne kind of thing. For an HBO show, that's it. 4 feet is the standard. So the reason we want to be there is that's where the maximum microbial activity is occurring. So we want to set that up. And we don't put anything in the way, no vaults, no metal containers or hardwood caskets or anything like that. No invasive preservation, like embalming. We don't need to do any of those things. This eliminates all the potential contaminants and it has no leftovers. So it's a one-step process, supercharges soil, significantly increases land preservation capacity, which is another thing we're really working toward here. So here's how it works. The soil's removed from the grave and then we separate it. We keep it in strata, right? Soil types. We want to keep those microbial communities intact. Then we're going to place finishing material that we are collecting for later use. We're going to have all of that ready to protect the mound when it settles. And these containers can be any kind of container. This picture happens to have a woven, this is willow, but softwoods, pine, caskets are fine, seagrass, and then we use linen, cotton, hemp, wool, things like that for shrouds, 100% biodegradable. And bodies that are near the surface are going to decompose faster and more aerobically. That's what we're looking for. When I'm saying closer, I mean that we're going to have what's called a smell barrier. 18 to 24 inches is a good idea. It could be to the horizon or it could be with the full mound over it. So that's going to protect you from any kind of animal disturbance or anything like that. Biomass, just that little bit that you can see there, it could be straw, it could be pine, it could be flowers, it could be anything. But we place that at the bottom of the grave and then also put it above after the casket's in or the shroud is in. We call that blanketing, that top layer. We want to do that, then we're going to return all that soil in the reverse order. And if we've had to, and here in New Hampshire, we're going to cut some kind of root system, we're going to put those roots back in. That's where the mycorrhizal reintegration occurs in the land, so that happens faster. It helps uptake nutrients more efficiently. So this is kind of a good way to look at it. First, I mentioned some of the things people are concerned about, common questions having to do with water safety and these animal disturbances. By the way, no animal can dig anywhere near all of this. It's the skunks you gotta watch out for. They like the grubs after you open things up. People are worried about what about my titanium knee? What about germs? Just pathogens and all that kind of stuff. All of that, all of those things are non-issues for various reasons, and I can give you all the reasons, but we don't need to go into them today. Just know that it's what we've been putting in the ground with the bodies for the last 100 years or so. That plume I mentioned, that's the concern. It's not the body itself. And winter burials also, people always wonder about that. They're easy. They've been done for centuries. There are 3 Midwestern states that require that people be buried all winter long. And when I polled the cemeterians here in New Hampshire at a meeting where I was addressing them recently, I asked them, how many of you are burying further into winter than you have before? And I'd say 80% of the hands went up. So cemeteries are changing their rules. They can do it. There isn't any reason not to. If you're still worried about well contamination, that seems to be one of the top things. I will go into that a little bit. You have to remember that concrete vaults have no protective properties. They crack and leak and, all that anyway. If you're not particularly concerned about your neighbor right over here, which is, by the way, located by the side of a river, how many cemeteries do you know that are called Riverside or Lakeview, right? We tended to bury right up against the water. If they weren't worried and nothing terrible has happened, except for what just recently happened north of us, which is a whole other reason, we're not worried about contamination around us. The hard science, just a quick one for you, a family of 4 flushes 100 times the amount of nitrates. That's something we're concerned about, be specific. 100 times the amount of nitrates in one day, flushing, than a body over its entire burial. So, not a problem. There are 4 types of cemeteries in New Hampshire, starting with home burials. We can bury on our own property. If we exercise the right to do that, then they never have to leave home. That's always enticing. Also, if you own property that has a cemetery on it, you have a built-in family cemetery and a whole bunch of new relatives, but they're really quiet, so it's good. It is for family members only. You can't just invite all your friends over. But you have to record it with the municipal cemetery trustees, the ones that we vote in every year. And you're going to put it on the deed if you transfer the property. Doesn't mean you have to do it right away, but if you sell the property, you do need to. And you're going to provide a public right-of-way. I always call this lipstick on a napkin. You just have to mark X, ... and to help someone in the future get to that grave without getting caught trespassing on someone's private property. If you don't do it, the selectmen will do it for you. So go ahead and take care of that. There are setbacks from water. Again, we're careful about it. We're just not too concerned. Water, highways, buildings, all that kind of thing. And we don't have a lot of zoning ordinances here in the state of New Hampshire that are specific about burial. I've only found one so far in the southern part of the state. And a big question I get is, gosh, isn't this going to impact my property value? And what we found is, no, it absolutely doesn't. People who are making decisions about buying your house are going to be deciding on a variety of issues. They may actually even like the idea of having an historic cemetery or a family cemetery. It could be the color of your house that turns it, so don't worry about this. In New Hampshire, we have several cemeteries. We have 14 now, 14 municipal cemeteries, because that's a system that we have here. The state requires that every municipality provide burial space for its own citizens, which means that every one of these, except for West Lebanon Cemetery, will only take its own townspeople. So that means that's great, because it creates a sense of place for all the people who are being buried in their hometown. That's different than being in an independent cemetery somewhere. But this is important to know, that the cemetery trustees make all the rules in the cemetery. So you can decide whether you want your trustees to change the rules around this so that your cemetery could become a green cemetery. People choose this, sense of place is really important. And that's part of the reason that we are building new types of cemeteries now, beyond the ones that we've seen. Natural burial grounds are open to everyone, and they're independently operated. And they welcome anyone of any ilk to them. The main thing is that they follow those green burial rules, right? The depth and what goes in and what doesn't. Conservation burial grounds are going to move a step further and partner with land trusts so that we can protect that land by placing an easement or other type of protective instrument on it. I think in order to understand this a little bit better, we need to flip our thinking. So instead of seeing these cemeteries as commodities, we need to see them as a strategy for saving intrinsically valuable land. And that's once you get to the conservation level, that's the way we're viewing things. So what might it feel like to attend a natural burial service? These images depict all types of cemeteries, by the way, I want to warn you about that. Someone watched this show a while ago, and she said, that's it, I'm going back to cremation, this is just too complicated. So I don't want you to think that this is complicated, I'm just showing you a lot of variations on the basic process of how this works. It's not one size fits all, there's nothing cookie cutter about this, just demonstrating things that others have done. So natural and conservation level cemeteries are likely to have caskets and shrouded loved ones carried to the gravesite because we're not paving roads, we're not driving in. So this is bringing back the age-old tradition of processions. All the old movies that you watch, right? There's always a procession. Well, there's something really important about that and really special that we've lost in doing it differently. It gives mourners a chance to participate, even if it's just walking side by side. It immerses them in the task at hand. And we tend to forget that grief is physical as well as emotional or spiritual. Processions and the carrying, just the carrying, can be really cathartic. And when we take turns carrying and leading and following, these are all sort of these significant kind of ritual aspects. They help us stay in liminal time, right? Time out of time. When we stop everything else in our lives to pay attention to this, and we do it in a very physical way, it helps us process and absorb things better. So we found that what we do often is stop on the way. Stop to change hands, stop to change leaders, stop for a poem or some music. We find that the music that happens in these also is very different from typical hymns or church music or something that's very, very much geared toward performance. This is about the gift of music that happens along the way. People feel a little more free to participate that way. When we're physically entering the burial space, it's pretty powerful when you arrive at the destination. Whether you get there on your own steam or with the help of some kind of mobility device, these cemeteries are consciously devising ways for everyone to have access to natural burial spaces. As I was talking about with the environmental justice issues, we're trying to make sure that everybody can get there comfortably and safely. We also want to have things in place for later. So we're building the ADA, American Disabilities Act, level walkways in at least limited spaces. We want to be sure everyone has access. We use electric golf carts or things like this. The one on the far right was built by high school students in a welding class. Even the horse and the burros, we don't have a lot of those here, but anything we can do to help everyone, including the deceased, to get to the destination is the key. The grave will already have been prepared with biomass that I mentioned, all that's laid at the bottom. It creates an oxygen trap and it also helps us pull straps out easily. The sides of the grave will have wide planks or extended sides for people to stand on when lowering, and that's safer for the pallbearers and the lowerers. It prevents the sides from caving in. People are worried about that, but 3.5 to 4 feet isn't that big a deal anyway. You can see on the far right that we lay rails across. We have ropes and straps like that that are ready to receive the casket or the shrouding board on top. You simply lift up the straps, someone pulls the rails, and the lowering can occur. We'll look at a couple other ways in just a sec. But there's nothing about natural burial that precludes the ability to have graveside services, and everybody who's you're used to having as part of this, funeral directors and musicians, clergy, celebrants. These are all essential support systems and support services. Full military honors are possible, and very common, by the way, in these cemeteries. A lot of veterans want to be buried in the land, directly in the land of the country that they fought for. That's the way they look at it, that's the way they express it. And so many are choosing natural burial over paid veteran spaces to avoid the vaults and so on. Just an interesting thing to know. Mourners often feel free to contribute a lot more readily in a relaxed environment. So we find that families and community members, friends, often have this organic response. You know, you'll have things that are planned, but then surprising and amazing things happen. A lot of people have told me that laying their loved ones to rest, surrounded by nature, just that alone, changes their experience with grief. So it's not just the burial itself, it's about all of the things that flow out from that. It can be very profound. So back to lowering for a quick minute. The casket's lowered, again, by grasping those rope ends and lifting. You can do it also by just walking from one end of the grave to the other and lowering. And if you have a shrouding board underneath, we need that for stability for a shroud. You can either bury it if you want it to be there, just biodegradable materials, or we can do what I call a tip and slide, and you just sort of tip it, you sort of jiggle it out, you can get it back out of there. Some cemeteries are still using hydraulic lowering devices. You've probably seen those in standard conventional cemeteries. It's fine, whatever works. The shroud or the casket being lowered into place, there's some of the biomass that's sitting on the top there on the far left. That's that blanketing, and what it does, which is really helpful, is that it dulls the sound of the soil hitting something hard. This is important for people. They want to feel as though they're putting someone to rest. They don't want to feel as though they're hammering it in. So you'll see in the middle picture we've got various size shovels, always some really small ones. Kids are incredible. They just make it their job. They get in there. I have one video of a little girl at a funeral of a friend, and it was a rainy day. She had on her wellies and her raincoat and her tutu, and she's out there with the shovel, and she is finishing in her grandfather's grave. It just went on and on to the last moment. It's important for people to be able to do that, for kids to be able to do that. We left them out for a very long time, and they need to come back. Lots of people recognize that this is their last chance to do something for someone that they love. They'll often start with a handful, and then they'll pick up a shovel, and then the next thing you know, the jacket's off and the sleeves are rolled up. Yeah, it's a pretty important and probably most memorable experience that people will mention in hindsight. So all the soil stays once it's in. After it's mounded up, we're going to cover it with greens or flowers or organic material, whatever. It's beautiful, and that's nice, particularly as you're walking away. You want to be able to have that memory. But it also stabilizes the mound for coming days. You want to avoid erosion of the mound, or wind and rain, whatever has to happen. These fresh flowers, by the way, these are hothouse flowers. We tend not to use them much, but if people want them, that's fine. We're just going to remove them later. And from there, we're going to be looking at putting native plantings and ground covers, whatever is natural to that area. And we're going to install that probably as part of a restoration plan. Most of these areas have conservation plans in place. They're following conservation best practices, and so they will have a restoration plan for making that land, getting that land back to where it started. Some cemeteries are going back to the practice of reusing burial spaces after a significant period of time, usually 2 or 3 generations out. This is common practice throughout the world, just not here, although it is perfectly legal here. We can talk about that more later on if you want to. Memorialization is really important. You'll frequently hear people who think this is just a terrible idea say things like, oh, they don't even put down stones. Well, that's not true. We do use GPS units because we're trying to improve our record systems, but that's not memorialization. we'll use field stone often, or some stone that's native to the area. And that's fine, we're just gonna make it flat so that we can maintain better. We're not mowing grass most of the time, so we want a way to not wreck our machines when we're cleaning things up. On the far right, you can see the use of QR codes. This is kind of interesting. I get different reactions to this. Some people go, oh, that's just so, that's so modern and, digital, and I can't handle my iPhone as it is. Well, the key here is that we're losing interest in cemeteries and in ancestry and all of those things because younger generations have never been without technology. So what we're doing is using that technology. You have a younger person who can show up, pull out their iPhone, and hit that QR code, and up comes music, poetry, videos, right? All kinds of captured memories for that person, and that speaks to young people. It engages them, and it brings us to a very different place around all of this. We're also looking at permanent or temporary art installations. Lots of things, lots of memory walls or cenotaphs, which is essentially that. They're hardscapes with engraved names on them. They're usually put in deliberate meditative spaces. So we're incorporating different types of spaces into the cemetery. All of these things are about expanding memorial options, so we're not eliminating them. So other things happen. These spaces are really important for welcoming people back. And we have all kinds of crazy stuff. Yep, you're looking at goat yoga, solstice events, concerts and gardening and bird watching, and family picnics, life cycle celebrations. One of the first cemetery here in the US is in South Carolina. They do more baby baptisms than they do funerals these days. So it's always bringing people back in. Congressional Cemetery in Washington, D.C. has green space and has had for a very long time. They have dog parties in the cemetery. So all of these places are for the living, not just for the dead. These life-affirming activities tie people to the land in really meaningful ways, and that's important for conservation. Land trusts, to tie people in, to have them invest in what happens on this land. And there's more that happens here. Natural cemeteries can support agricultural, educational, teaching, research projects, all kinds of things happening here. And nurseries, several are starting their own nurseries right on the property, and they use those plants to help with that restoration I was talking about, but they also sell these out in the community. So things like timber cutting, other conservation activities are perfectly fine. We use portions of conserved land for the burial, not the whole area. So the materials, I've been talking about that a little bit, but I want to reinforce this. You can use anything you want that is softwood that's fully biodegradable, so plain pine boxes or woven caskets, even found materials. You can, rig something up. But the closer the materials are harvested to where you live, the better for those craftsmen and those makers who sell these things locally. And I'll show you that in a sec. I want you to see shrouds. I bought a very expensive, beautiful shroud way back in the day, thinking this is the way I had to go. And then when my mom died, I used a $4 100% guide, and she would have loved it. She was a very frugal lady. And it was beautiful. So you can do any of that. All of these are fine. 100% cotton quilts, wool blankets. I assisted with a burial with a wool blanket recently. And someone sent me an image of one with an army blanket from a veteran. That was his army blanket. And he had kept it all those years and insisted on being buried in it. As I said, they haven't made that stabilizing board, but that's cool. Canvas carriers, anything you need. This is a great place to get started, and you can make materials yourself. And if you use a funeral home, you can't be penalized for bringing your own. It's perfectly fine. But if you want help with this or you want ideas, this is a great website to go to, funerartisanscollective.org, and you'll see what all the makers are doing. I started this years ago for folks here in New England, and then people all across the US and Canada wanted to be on, and now I've got people all around the world who want to be on this. So it's starting to really get attention from people, and it's great. Support local artists. Here's another organization. This is one that I started about, 18 years ago. Various names we've gone through. But you're going to find most of the information that I've talked about today, plus other videos, all different types of things, information, specifically on how to do funerals yourself on that website. And I want to let you know about 2 new organizations that have just formed in the last few months. To get natural burial here in New Hampshire, independent of those hybrid cemeteries. The first one is Natural Burial New Hampshire. You can go take a look at that. We're looking for board members always, looking for volunteers, looking for people who are interested. If you want to be on a newsletter, I'll put out the sheets so that you can sign in. It doesn't obligate you to anything, just so that we know you're there. The second organization is for right here. That first one, by the way, was for the whole state of New Hampshire. We're fundraising for all of that to support independent natural burials. White Mountain Conservation Burial is right here in the Plymouth area. So again, we're looking for people to help us here. But this is for the organization that will actually operate the cemetery. Okay? So there's a lot happening. There's a lot afoot right here in the area. So I hope you'll join in. A couple more quick things. Who's really interested? It's always good to show you. We all like the idea that if somebody else thinks it's okay, we can think it's okay too. In 2021, this is a American Funeral Director is a trade magazine in the funeral industry, and when they came up with this time, they've been keeping track of these questions for almost a decade and a half. They started out, first one I saw, it said about 12% of the people who answered were interested in environmentally friendly funerals and burials. Now we're up to 91%. And if this is also for, they asked the question, if you had to make a decision in the next 2 weeks, what would you prefer? And 84.4% said green burial. So it's pretty good. I keep the list on the New Hampshire Funeral website for all the organizations in the country and Canada, and you'll find almost 500. We're creeping toward 500 green cemeteries. And what that tells me is that people are asking for it. When I first started working with the Green Burial Council, the guy who started it, his name is Joe Seavey, he said to me, look, nobody goes to a restaurant and orders something that's not on the menu. He said, if we don't build it, and if we don't tell people it's possible, they're not going to ask for it. So that's our job. So the 4 things, 4 big takeaways here, it's pretty simple. No leftovers, nothing to take care of, one and done. We're going to be sequestering precious resources. We are going to be stewarding and protecting land. And we are going to be finding ways to practice justice in our communities. So those are the things to take away. How can you do it? One of the things you can do is keep your loved one home a little bit longer, bring them home for a little bit longer. Still hire a funeral director if you want to for the parts that you want them to do, but you can and you are welcome to, and you have the legal authority to take care of someone in your own home, simply bathing and keeping them cool. You can make your own containers. You can join a natural burial group. And you can support land trusts that have properties. Now, we don't have any yet in New Hampshire, but your influence with land trusts, letting them know that you want them to be participating in this, will be really helpful. And again, our trustees are the ones in our local municipal cemeteries that make the decisions. Talk to them about changing the rules. Or if you don't like the answer there, you can run for office yourself. It's a pretty easy thing to do here. So that's what I've got for you. I hope we did okay with time and that I answered most of your questions. But I'm happy to answer anything else you have.
please? Is this one on? Let's do this. How about this one? Neither one of them. Oh, I hear this one. Okay. Please join me in thanking Lee Webster for Okay, questions, and you do have to speak right into this microphone. Did you have a question?
Lee, I had a question. When you said burials on your own property is for families only, if that property is sold, can the new buyers continue to add to the
They can.
burial?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask about pets because many people bury their pets, and if you could just comment on how that might happen relative to what you just described for humans in terms of death and that sort of thing.
Yeah, different states have different rules about where pets can be buried in relation to cemeteries. It's pretty much not done full body here in New Hampshire, but cremated remains of pets are often tucked into burials. Funeral directors kind of go along with that. In terms of making it a formal thing so that there is a place to bury, we would have to create a special area for pets that's separate from humans here. There are a couple around the country that bury pets directly with human bodies, but that's a little tricky because you don't all die at the same time, so it can get a little tough. Some cemeteries will offer what's called a second right of reinterment, so for an additional cost, you can put the pet in. There's all different ways to get around it. It's going to be interesting to see how we do it here. Because we have got some things that don't allow us to do that direct burial. Yeah. But it's on people's minds, I can tell you that.
I have a question.
So I think a lot of us are very, very interested in having this way to depart. And my question is, you know, sometimes we don't plan ahead super well. And if I were to die this week and I let it be known in my living will that I wanted a green burial, what would be the first, second, and third steps for whoever's taking care of business to do?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'll try to be brief. Not easy for me. I think that the most important thing is that conversation that you had with your family prior to the death. It's really important to have done that. But we need to understand that even though we've written it down, we've had the conversation, we might have even told your doctor or your attorney or anybody else, the fact is that people who are left are only going to be able to do what's available and what's possible. So if you, Connie, just this week wanted to have a green burial, you'd be out of luck. Unless you wanted to be buried in Lebanon. It's the only green cemetery in the state at this point. And that probably doesn't fit very well with your plans. It's just a standard cemetery, everybody's, ducks in a row kind of thing. Unless you wanted to go out of state. And the closest green cemetery to us is Leamington, Maine. So that might be your next best bet. But essentially what happens is that the family can get on the phone to a cemetery, make that arrangement, and they can, if you want a funeral director to do it, they'll manage all of that for you. If you want to do it yourself, then your family member, your next of kin, is going to complete the paperwork and transport you to the cemetery. It's really pretty basic. Yeah, does that answer what you were asking?
a follow-up on that.
Yeah.
How much land does Connie have to be buried on her land?
Oh, on our own land, it isn't a matter of acreage, it's a matter of proximity. So it's 50 feet from a well or a known water source, 100 feet from buildings, I think. So, yeah, you have to, that's the key, is following the setback rules. Yeah. Oh, Marcia. Oh,
I have a
oh,
quick question. What if it's on somebody else's property? Can you get permission to be buried at somebody's property, where they agree to that burial?
No. No, the state of New Hampshire is very, and all states are very, very particular about this. Private home burial is for family only. And the only sort of wiggle room that I've run into around this is for partners who've been together for 10, 20 years, who've never legally married. We're burying them on that property. But no, you can't invite your friends over, unfortunately. You can if you start a cemetery organization, and then you can have them come in. And that's why we're doing that. We're starting the IRS requires that you be formed as a 501c13, which is for cemeteries specifically. If you want to do that on your property and invite your friends over for that, that's fine.
So actually as a follow-up to what Lee was just starting, and to put in a pitch for a natural burial in New Hampshire, the effort of this organization is to help other people create cemeteries as these nonprofit 501cs. We're looking for people to not only be interested in that organization, but also make donations to help other people who want to create cemeteries, to then help them hold their hands through the process of creating these cemeteries for public use, for everybody else, who can't find a cemetery. So, personal interest of mine, I want a natural burial, but there's no place to put my body. So, having these, being able to promote the ability to create these cemeteries is what naturalburialnh.org is. That's where all the efforts are pointing towards that. So we appreciate whatever support you need to give that organization.
Thank you. You can tell this is one of my board members. By the way, I also want to recognize Doug McLean, who's here. He's a board member with us at White Mountain Conservation, the local group as well. So we've got a little representation here.
So if I'm looking for a wedding, I can find a wedding planner, and that's pretty easy, just go on the web. But how do you find, it frankly feels a little daunting to me, where do you find a burial planner? I'm assuming that not all funerals are really into this kind of thing. So how do you find one that would really resonate with it?
Yeah, there are really a couple of different options around this, several options actually. But let's go with the funeral director first. People ask me this question, are funeral directors upset about this? No, funeral directors in the state of New Hampshire are not allowed to own or operate cemeteries, which limits their ability to serve their clients, their families. So funeral directors are going to do above and beyond for green burial families because they're going to be helping look for what those opportunities are, and they're going to be thrilled to be able to give you something that they can't make themselves. So does that make sense? So funeral directors are not a problem. They do know how to bury people, whether there's a vault or not. They do know how to work with people who are bringing in their own caskets and shrouds. They may not have firsthand experience yet because it isn't here, but they will, and they are trained. They're trained to do body preparation for green burial. So let's keep them on the list.
And do they know for sessions and music and all those other pieces?
Yeah, the other pieces are really usually up to the family. The family tends to do that. But we have a new group of people who are getting trained all around the country. I mentioned celebrants before. Not exactly the same as clergy, but I mean, your clergy can do all of this kind of thing that they already do. They interface with the family. They come up with the music. They help arrange all those things. So absolutely clergy. If you don't want to go with clergy, celebrants are either interfaith or non-denominational. So you can find a celebrant who will also help you do that. They often book themselves as storytellers. So there are people who are going to help the family tell the story of that person. And that's a different way of looking at it. Another group is our community care groups. All right, I mean, I've talked to folks here at Stuff several times about this. The idea is to get a bunch of people together who are interested in supporting fellow congregants or people in the community with the home funeral piece that then segues right into the funeral planning piece. They can do all of this without charging any money, and it's perfectly legal. And it means that, you know, someone you've sat in a chair next to for the last 20 years can be there for you or for your family members. So there are lots of folks who are educated around this.
What about death doulas?
Yeah, death doulas is what they're calling themselves these days. That we call them end-of-life doulas. It's important to know that end-of-life doulas are people who tend to do the planning aspect of things and the end-of-life non-medical care. But that's up until the point where the person dies. At the point that the person dies, we have a completely different legal landscape. So doulas don't move into that. Not to get paid anyway. They might stop being paid and then stick around, in which case we're going to call them after-death educators or home funeral guides. And they will oftentimes double as celebrants. So you want to kind of feel out these kinds of folks and see what their training is, see what their interest is. So that is another option for you too. But just don't expect every person who says they do end-of-life work to know all of everything. They don't and they can't.
I'm wondering, and I know there are many parameters for this, but how much land would someone have to buy to create a green cemetery?
Gosh, that's a great question. In England, where this was happening simultaneous to the US, they have about 300 green cemeteries. Some of them are half an acre. Here in the US, we tend to, because we have more land, we tend to think bigger around this. The Green Burial Council is an organization that certifies cemeteries at these three different levels: the hybrid, the natural, and the conservation level. And the hybrid could be, half an acre. The natural could be half an acre. When we get to conservation level, we're looking for a minimum of 20 acres. And honestly, when you think about this in terms of the numbers and the logistics around this, every acre on a conservation level cemetery is going to vary between 300 and 400 people. That's, Riverside's varying between 1,200 and 1,500 an acre, right? It's all crammed right in together with the vaults. We're using land differently. We're letting the land tell us where the burials need to occur. And we're often burying in pots. So if you have a family that you want to have all buried, we'll reserve a pot for your family. In different ways of burying, in the meadow or in the grove or that type of thing. So that's going to change the amount of land that you need depending on the way that you hope to have the burials occur. But for the most part, go small, go big. There's no rule, unless you want to be certified, and you don't have to be. Sure.
Well, thank you all for being here. Please join me again for thanking Lee for sharing her wisdom. And it is actually my pleasure. I want to present you with a handcrafted chalice that Dr. Fred Kelsey made. It's right underneath here. Here you you are.
Oh,
Thank you for doing that.
I finally got a piece of pretzel. Thank you so much. That's
And a
very
special
lovely.
thanks to Penny Baker TV for recording this talk this morning. We appreciate it.
Great.
Our service next week will be, thank you. I appreciate this stool as well. Our service next week will be led by Susan Ellen Skinner, and Dr. Clarissa Utley will be here speaking. We hope to see you there. For a full schedule of summer service topics, you can visit www.starkingfellowship.org. And now it is time in our service to extinguish the chalice. Our reading this morning is by Deborah Burhill. We have basked in the warmth and beauty of this flame and this community. As the chalice flame is extinguished, let us carry it. As it glows within, let us kindle new sparks within these walls and beyond. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Have a wonderful day.